Hello, I'm the real-life fake wizard. The Island Man encouraged executives to add microtransactions into video games. Did you get that? Did you hear me? The Island Man, financier Jeff Epstein, was part of the butterfly effect that ended with microtransactions becoming a cornerstone element to Call of Duty. I know that sounds insane, but the email dump is, well, it's terrifying for more reasons than one. On January 30th, 2026, the DOJ released over 3 million files related to the Baron of Little St. James. And buried in those files is a conversation from May 2013 between Jeffy, Bobby Kotick, the CEO of Activision at the time, and hacker Pablos Holman about how to get children hooked on virtual goods. One of them literally used the phrase indoctrinating kids into an economy. That was 2013. In 2026 today, 42% of millennials are engaged in gambling. 34% of Gen Z are as well. 1 in 10 young adult gamers is in debt from loot boxes, all from surprise mechanics inside video games that they started playing when they were 8 years old. An entire generation has been groomed into addiction by the video game industry, and I don't use that word lightly, but they were groomed, because that's what this is. This is a system designed to exploit psychological vulnerabilities in young people for profit, and now we're seeing the results of it. Millennials and Gen Z are gambling at rates we've never seen before, and the research is starting to connect the dots back to the games released around the 2013 era, setting the stage and playing the long game that would lead to gambling addiction today. Today's indie game shoutout is DOT Defense. Welcome to the front lines. Build towers, muster armies, and conquer the map. Challenge yourself in single-player campaign following the Chroma War. Survive relentless waves in solo defense or battle it out in local matches against friends and AI bots. Victory comes with the last HQ standing. To learn more about this and hundreds of other indie games, visit our free indie game discovery network, fakeportal.com, or scan the QR code on your screen. Now back to the video. Let's start with the May 2013 email. Here we find Epstein working as an intermediary between Pablos Holman and Bobby Kotick, implying there was a previous discussion between Epstein and Kotick, and this is the part that should make your skin crawl. He said he was, quote, all for indoctrinating kids into an economy. He noted the irony in Kotick's example that real-world rewards meant virtual items in games. This is sickening, but it's not unbelievable. You know, to someone who isn't following how evil corporate leadership is, or perhaps hasn't worked in a corporate environment like that, they'll hear this news and it sounds like an Alex Jones rant come true. The video game executives are grooming kids into adult gambling addiction, and the frogs are gay. Like, it makes for a bad movie or a good book, but it's horrifying that this is real life. Now, Bobby Kotick's name shows up over 300 times in the financier's files. This isn't exactly a guy Jeffy met at a party one time. It would appear they had a close relationship. To what extent? We don't know yet. And the information coming out of these files is, well, it's damning. Like, do not pass go, do not collect $200, go directly to hell. And look, I can hear naysayers in the comments already. Wizard Island Man didn't invent microtransactions. He wasn't running Activision. He didn't write any code. He was just some creepy dude who knew people. Yes, that's exactly it. That's what he did. He connected people. He introduced powerful executives to ideas and each other. And the ideas that flowed through his network seemingly had consequences for all of us for decades and even now. Did Jeffy personally put loot boxes into Call of Duty? Did he suggest them in the first place? As of right now, the answer is no. But did the people in his circle discuss targeting children with gambling mechanics, and then those exact systems got put into games marketed to kids? Let's look at the timeline. Call of Duty Black Ops 2 introduced microtransactions in March 2013, about 4 months after its November 2012 release date. Branded as micro items, these were optional cosmetics and convenience items, emphasizing little luxuries without gameplay advantages. They rolled out in waves, starting on the Xbox 360. Over 28 personalization packs were released through 2014, generating revenue via small purchases at about $1 to $2 a piece. Call of Duty's microtransactions were introduced more or less as an experiment to see if people would buy them. There were still conventional DLC map packs back then, and those were already part of the game's sales model. 2 months later, after introducing this experiment, Bobby Kotick and financier Jeff Epstein engage in a conversation about using products like this to foster addiction in children. But let's zoom out further, because microtransactions and the history behind them have always and forever been about experimenting on buyers. It has always been a test to see what you're willing to buy. What are you willing to stomach as a consumer? On April 1st, 2006, Elder Scrolls Oblivion released the Horse Armor DLC for $1.99 on PC. People mocked it. It became a 2006 meme, and yet, even amongst all the internet mockery, Bethesda's first major DLC experiment proved gamers are willing to buy this style of digital goods even when the majority of the internet mocked it. Now, most people point to this and say that Horse Armor was the first culprit, that this set the tone for microtransactions, but I'd like to challenge that, because I believe that map packs and DLC downloadable content was the first seal to be broken on this whole problem. Once the vehicle for digital distribution for digital goods was established, it was all downhill. It was only a matter of time. It just took years. Again, every single time a new form of digital good was introduced, it was video game publishers challenging the market to see what gamers were willing to spend money on. Extra content is not new. In years prior to Horse Armor, PC and console gaming companies released content expansions, like World of Warcraft: The Burning Crusade, Star Wars: Empire at War: Force of Corruption. Civilization 3 had expansions. Halo 1 had map packs you can get to play with friends. But to get these expansions, you had to go to a physical store and buy them. In 2005, Halo 2 released additional multiplayer map content via Xbox Live. While not the first major IP to have a content expansion released exclusively digitally, it was among the earliest highly successful examples for a blockbuster franchise. Some of those maps were digital only. Well, there it is. That changed the vehicle for delivery that I referenced earlier. Now you could ship expanded content and extended content digitally instead of physically on discs. You've proven enough customers are available via the downloadable pipeline. Fast forward to the Xbox 360 era, and now companies were delivering entire story and campaign expansions digitally. Map packs became an essential part of a video game's lifespan, with games like Call of Duty and Gears of War 2 getting multi-quarter map pack updates at $5 to $20 a download. On August 11th, 2009, as part of a massive software overhaul, Xbox 360 introduced the Avatar Marketplace, allowing users to purchase cosmetics, clothing, and props for their Xbox avatar. The avatars were derivatives of Nintendo Miis that your friends could look at while you were offline, and you had the luxury of spending real money converted into Microsoft points to acquire these digital goods. In 2009, the FIFA series added Ultimate Team Packs. Packs gave random player cards. This added team building via randomized purchases in the sports genre. 2010, Team Fortress 2 sees the addition of supply crates. Players can earn crates in-game or buy keys at $2.49 a pop to open them immediately. This added random cosmetic rewards to the free-to-play shooter genre. 2012, Mass Effect 3 added multiplayer gear packs. This added non-essential paid randomization to a premium AAA single-player game that had a multiplayer function tacked on. And that brings us to 2013, where we are up to the timeline of the Island Man communicating with Bobby Kotick. The delivery system is in place. Games across multiple genres have experimented and tested the willpower of players to see if they could resist microtransactions and loot boxes. Map packs and DLC were integral parts of the delivery system now. Season passes were still becoming part of the gaming vernacular. Effectively, the digital economy that Epstein and Kotick would discuss was already there. They built the sandbox and proved customers were willing to play with it, and then it gets worse. 2013, Counter-Strike Go, Valve introduced weapon cases. This added a tradable skin economy to competitive FPS games. 2013, Call of Duty Black Ops 2 gets micro items, optional cosmetics, and convenience items added to a massive AAA multiplayer title. 2013, Dota 2 introduces what would later be called Battle Passes, though it was called Compendium at the time. 2013, Battlefield 4 Battle Packs, another massive AAA multiplayer title adding random cosmetic microtransactions. 2014, Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, supply drops, random variants of playable gear, and XP boosts. 2016, Overwatch, loot boxes popularizing fun cosmetics for hero shooters in a game targeted towards teenage players and kids. Overwatch would normalize player skins and costumes for the youth demographic who had missed out on all the games prior. 2016, Roblox, originally released in 2006, exploded in popularity with children starting around 2016, with a massive growth continuing during the COVID-19 pandemic. This surge greatly increased children's exposure to monetization features such as loot boxes, game passes, and avatar items. In November 2025, Roblox CEO David Baszucki said he would support adding prediction markets inside Roblox if it could be done legally and educationally. Quote, "I actually think it's a brilliant idea if it could be done in an educational way that's legal. I would be a big fan of it." 2017, Fortnite, a free-to-play live service game built around endless seasonal battle passes requiring repetitive daily play. To avoid missing out on rotating rarities before they vanish forever, players could invest dozens of hours per season in FOMO-fueled repetition or purchase instant access. This heralded the dominant era of cosmetic-only pay-to-skip monetization in multiplayer gaming. Oh, and it was targeted primarily at kids. 2017, Middle-earth: Shadow of War, a single-player game including an entirely curated endgame that intentionally wasted the player's time through repetition. To achieve the final credits roll and complete the game, players could grind out 50+ hours of repetitive content or purchase loot boxes to overcome the overwhelming time hurdle. Here we find one of the largest cases of pay-to-win mechanics applied to a single-player game. And all that brings us to a big one. 2017, Star Wars Battlefront 2, which came out with a progression system tied entirely to loot crates. You want to unlock Darth Vader? That's going to be about 40 hours of grinding, or you could buy crystals with grandma's credit card, open loot boxes, and hopefully get what you needed inside. Here we find a multiplayer game that wasn't just cosmetics. This time you were paying for gameplay advantages against other players. After engaging in one of the worst PR moves in gaming history by replying to an already viral Reddit post called "Why Star Wars Battlefront 2 is the most consumer-unfriendly game ever made," EA earned the ire of 600,000 plus Redditors, achieving the most downvoted comment in history, and also earned the ire of politicians around the world. Hawaii State Representative Chris Lee held a press conference, and he said this is a Star Wars-themed online casino designed to lure kids into spending money. Belgium launched an investigation. They ruled loot boxes were gambling. The Netherlands did the same thing. Both countries banned loot boxes outright for all video games. All of which would eventually bring us to 2019, when EA famously attempted to reframe loot boxes as, quote, surprise mechanics during a high-profile UK parliamentary hearing. The statement was delivered by Kerry Hopkins, EA's Vice President of Legal and Government Affairs. Evidence suggests a close link between loot boxes and gambling, especially among adolescents. Do you consider loot boxes to be an ethical feature? We don't call them loot boxes, Hopkins began her response, adding that EA instead refers to them as surprise mechanics. She then elaborated, if you go to a store that sells lots of toys and you do a search for surprise toys, what you'll find is that this is something people enjoy. They enjoy surprises, and so it's something that's been part of toys for years, whether it's Kinder Eggs or Hatchimals or LOL Surprise. We do think that the way we have implemented these kinds of mechanics in FIFA, which of course is our big one, our FIFA Ultimate Team and our packs, is actually quite ethical and fun. It's enjoyable to people. Hopkins emphasized, they aren't gambling, and we disagree that there's evidence that shows they lead to gambling. I don't think you need to be a rocket scientist to see this is a crock of crap, but let's go ahead and show the evidence now because there's plenty. Number one, in 2018, researchers published a study surveying nearly 7,500 gamers and measured two things: how much money people spent on loot boxes and their scores on something called the Problem Gambling Severity Index. What they found was a correlation of 0.53 between loot box spending and problem gambling scores. Now, in this study, the correlation runs from 0 to 1. Anything above a 0.5 is considered strong. So a 0.53 means there is a strong statistical relationship between spending money on loot boxes and showing signs of problem gambling. In fact, this correlation was stronger than the links they found with most other gambling activities in the study. Number two, in 2019, another study, this time specifically on teenagers. They surveyed 1,115 adolescents between 16 and 18 years old. Again, they measured loot box spending and problem gambling severity. And again, they found results at the upper end of medium, almost large, meaning the relationship between loot boxes and problem gambling in teenagers is substantial. Number three, in 2021, a UK study funded by the National Institute of Health looked at 3,549 young adults between the ages of 16 and 24. They did not just measure correlation like they had in the last two studies. They calculated odds ratios, which tells you how much more likely one group is to have a problem compared to another. Young people who bought loot boxes had 11.4 times higher odds of problem gambling than those who didn't buy them. Now, the researchers knew this could be misleading. Maybe loot box buyers are just more impulsive people in general. Maybe they already gamble more. So they adjusted for all of that: impulsivity, demographics, and other gambling behaviors. After all those adjustments, loot box buyers still had 4.4 times higher odds of problem gambling. This is not a small difference. Now, all three of those studies are what researchers call cross-sectional studies. They take a snapshot at one moment in time. They can tell you two things are related, but they can't tell you which one came first. Maybe loot boxes led to gambling problems, or maybe people who are already having gambling tendencies are just drawn to loot boxes. I'm no scientist. I'm just a fake wizard. And these are fair criticisms. Correlation is not causation, right? So the researchers started doing longitudinal studies. Instead of surveying people once, they followed the same people over months or years to see what happened. Which takes us to number four. In 2023, a team of researchers followed nearly 2,200 Spanish teenagers over 6 months. These were kids between 11 and 17. At the start, they measured who was buying loot boxes and who was gambling online. Then, they checked back 6 months later. What they found was that the kids who were buying loot boxes at the beginning were significantly more likely to have started gambling with real money by the end of the study. The loot box behavior came first. The gambling came after. That's not correlation anymore. Now we're in prediction mode. That's one behavior forecasting another behavior in the future. Number five, in 2024, another team replicated the previous 2023 study in British Columbia, Canada. This time, they specifically looked at young adults who had never gambled before. They wanted to isolate the question: does loot box spending predict gambling initiation in people who aren't already gamblers? The answer to that was yes. And importantly, it was specific to loot boxes only. Other types of microtransactions, like buying skins directly, paying for battle passes, didn't predict gambling initiation. Only the randomized purchases, only loot boxes. The odds ratio was between 1.3 and 2.1, meaning loot box spenders were 30 to 110% more likely to start gambling than the non-spenders. Number six, in 2025, a Belgian study followed over 2,000 teenagers for a full year. Same design. Measure behavior at the start, follow up later, see what predicts what. The result was the same. Gambling-like mechanics in games predicted real money gambling 12 months later. So what does all this research actually tell us? Well, the cross-sectional studies show strong correlation between loot boxes and problem gambling, correlations that hold up even after you account for personality traits and other gambling behaviors. The longitudinal studies show that loot box spending comes first and gambling comes after, not the other way around. And it's been replicated in Spain, Canada, Belgium, with teenagers and young adults over 6 months and 12 months. This is what reliable scientific evidence looks like. You've got multiple studies, multiple countries, multiple methodologies, all pointing in the same direction here. EA said they disagree if there's evidence that loot boxes lead to gambling, but the evidence exists now, and it's peer-reviewed. And there's more of it now than there was when Kerry Hopkins sat in front of Parliament and said it's like playing with toys. One more thing about the Kinder Egg comparison that was made. When you buy a Kinder Egg, you pay $2. You get chocolate and you get a toy, and the transaction is done. You're not sitting there buying Kinder Egg after Kinder Egg hoping to get a rare one. You know, there's no game matching you against kids who got better toys, so you feel like you need to keep buying eggs. There's no countdown timer telling you this Kinder Egg disappears in 24 hours. Whereas loot boxes use something called variable ratio reinforcement. It's the same psychological mechanism that makes slot machines addictive. You don't know when you're going to get what you want, so you have to keep trying. You have to keep spending. You keep pulling that lever. Brain imaging research shows that opening loot boxes activates the same reward pathways in the brain as gambling. The dopamine response is the same thing. 79% of young adults aged 11 to 24 in the UK describe loot boxes as highly addictive. Worse than just describing loot boxes as highly addictive, 1 in 10 young gamers reports having debt from engaging in loot box purchases. You gotta go through quite a few Hatchimals to amass this kind of issue, all right? Okay, so to recap, we've addressed that corporate executives discussed creating a digital economy. They discussed indoctrinating children into that digital economy. The vehicle for this marketplace was established through content expansion of video games. And over the course of decades, companies ran experiments offering digital products for dollars at a time for cosmetic goods. Nearly every one of those experiments was an overwhelming success, and even after games transitioned to full-on loot box gambling, only 2 countries have outlawed them. And here in America today, there's nothing. And in the United States of America, land of the free, home of the brave, protector of children, you've done absolutely nothing. Let's be specific about what nothing means. Since 2017, at least a dozen federal politicians have introduced bills, written letters, held hearings, and made public statements about loot boxes targeting children. Senator Josh Hawley from Missouri introduced the Protecting Children from Abusive Games Act in 2019. It would have banned loot boxes in games marketed to anyone under 18. It died in committee. He reintroduced it in 2021. It died again. Representative Lori Trahan from Massachusetts introduced the Loot Box Act. Same goal, regulate these systems as gambling. That also died in committee. Senators Maggie Hassan, Ed Markey, and Richard Blumenthal all wrote letters to the FTC. They urged the ESRB to add warning labels. They held hearings where researchers testified that kids who buy loot boxes are 11 times more likely to develop gambling problems. You know what came out of those hearings? The FTC held some workshops in 2018 and 2019. They invited experts, they heard testimonies, and then in 2020, they concluded that, and I'm paraphrasing here, self-regulation by the industry is sufficient enough. Self-regulation. The industry that makes billions of dollars from these systems gets to decide whether they're harmful or not. And shockingly, they decided that they were not harmful. The ESRB, which is funded by the gaming industry, by the way, added a label. In-game purchases includes random items. That's it. That's the protection. A label on the back of the box that nobody reads and no one buys anymore because all the game transactions are digital now too. Meanwhile, the Entertainment Software Association, the lobbying arm of the games industry, spent over $10 million between 2019 and 2023 fighting every single piece of legislation that would regulate loot boxes. $10 million to make sure your kids can keep gambling in video games. And it worked. Every bill died. Every hearing led nowhere. Every letter got a polite response and zero action. You want to know why? The First Amendment. That's the running excuse. Video games are protected speech under the Constitution. The Supreme Court ruled in 2011, Brown v. Entertainment Merchants Association, that you can't restrict game sales to minors because games are art, their expression. So now, apparently, slot machines for children are protected expression. But wait a minute. What's the legal definition of gambling? It requires valuable consideration, chance, and a prize of value. Yeah, the gaming industry argues that loot box items aren't valuable because you can't cash them out. Technically, you're not winning any money. You're just winning pixels in games that can and will be taken offline once we stop generating millions of dollars in profits on that specific title. Yeah, never mind that people are spending thousands of dollars on those pixels, never mind that there's an entire gray market for trading and selling digital goods, never mind that the psychological mechanics are identical to a casino. The legal definition doesn't quite fit, so we are all stuck. And while the politicians were holding hearings, the gaming industry hasn't slowed down at all. In fact, they've sped it all up. See, I've shown you the research, I've shown you the lobbying, I've shown you the political theater, but what I haven't shown you yet is what happened to gaming itself while all this nothing was happening in Washington. Mobile gaming is now half of the entire video game industry. Half, big half, $92 billion in 2024 alone. And mobile gaming runs almost entirely on gacha mechanics. Wait, you know what gacha is, don't you? You've heard of gacha. It's just loot boxes with anime characters. Same randomized pulls, same dopamine loops, same systems they tested on your kids in 2013, now deployed at global scale. Genshin Impact, pretty game, looks like Breath of the Wild, free to play, made $6.3 billion in 4 years. $6 billion on a free-to-play game. Well, how could they do that, wizard? Gotcha pulls. You want the cool character? Gamble for it. You don't get the cool character, you gamble again. The rates for the best stuff is less than 1%. 0.6% to be exact. So you keep gambling. You keep swiping your mom's credit card, and maybe you'll get there one day, champ. Well, wait a minute. Genshin Impact is a Chinese game, right? They have lots of gacha-style games coming out of China. Yeah, well, let me tell you about Diablo Immortal, because this one's from America. Activision Blizzard released Diablo Immortal in 2022. Yes, the same Activision Blizzard with then CEO Bobby Kotick, who was exchanging emails with the Island Man about indoctrinating kids into an economy.
Yes, yes.
You know how much it costs to fully upgrade a character in Diablo Immortal? Between $100,000 and $500,000. And I'm not exaggerating here. The data here is as current as February 2026. These are active numbers. There have been multiple investigations, multiple Reddit threads, multiple YouTubers all came to the same conclusion. To max out one character depending on your luck with the randomized gem system, you're looking at the cost of a house, not a down payment. The whole dang house. Players weren't confused about what this was. They knew going into it, but they still played it anyway. They're still playing it now. The game still makes money today because somewhere out there, someone is dropping 50 grand on digital gems. And that's exactly who these systems are designed for. Now look, I know some of you are thinking, and I'm sure some of you are posting in the comments, but Wizard, I don't play mobile games. I don't play gacha games. This doesn't affect me. Yeah, it does. According to the GDC 2025 State of the Industry report, 1/3 of AAA developers are currently working on live service games. Oh, live service games, huh? That's a buzzword phrase we talk about here quite a lot. A lot of YouTubers talk about live service games, actually. That's the polite term for games designed to extract money from you over time instead of just once at purchase. A 2023 survey found that 95% of video game studios are either developing or maintaining a live service game. EA reported that live service games made up 74% of their revenue in 2024. That's $5.6 billion from live service, from battle passes, from ultimate team packs, from the systems we've been talking about this entire video. The kids who grew up on FIFA packs in 2013 and Call of Duty micro items, they're in their 20s now. They've been doing this for a decade. And to them, this isn't a corruption of gaming. This is gaming. They have no idea. Predatory monetization is the baseline to these people. They don't see it as an intrusion. they don't know it was ever different. So we've talked about how executives planned this, and they won. They achieved the digital economy the island man wanted, and children were raised in a world where gaming includes gambling loot boxes, digital purchases in cosmetics and personalization, and heck, the games themselves are the norm. Kids didn't need to go to Circuit City or Toys R Us to get games at all. But those kids aren't kids anymore. What are we looking at today with those kids as adults? TransUnion released their US betting report in 2025. Gambling activity increased to 30% of all consumers. That's a 5% point jump in 1 year. And the increase was driven almost entirely by two groups, Gen Z and millennials. 42% of millennials are now engaged in gambling, with 34% of Gen Z. These are young people who grew up on loot boxes and gotcha pulls, now moving that behavior into sports betting apps and online casinos. Here's something people won't like me pointing out. TransUnion found that millennials and Gen Z with the highest rates of mobile gaming app usage were also the most likely to use cryptocurrency apps, make impulse purchases, and seek high-risk financial speculation. They called these groups speculators. The data shows a pattern of financial risk-taking. It's not just gambling at all. It's a whole relationship with money that's been shaped by these systems. One study found that 37% of Gen Z respondents described themselves as addicted to sports betting. Not I like to bet sometimes, addicted. They self-identified as addicted. A study from Intuit Credit Karma found that 48% of gamblers reported mental health issues like depression tied to their betting habits. That's nearly 50%. I need you to understand something. This was not an accident. This was not an unintended consequence. This was the plan. This is what they wanted. In 2013, Pablos Holman said he was all for indoctrinating kids into an economy. Bobby Kotick discussed real-world rewards. That meant virtual in-game items at the time. And then, over the next decade, those systems were deployed, refined, tested, expanded, and normalized until an entire generation had been conditioned to pull levers and chase dopamine hits in exchange for their parents' credit card numbers. The kids who grew up buying loot boxes are now the adults betting on sports. The psychological training worked. They were conditioned from childhood to see randomized purchases as normal. Spending money for the chance at something was just entertainment at the time. They were groomed to become gamblers before they were old enough to understand what was happening to them. But if we're really going to talk about all of this, we can't not discuss the underlying problem as to why these young people are drawn to gambling so much. Because it's not just gambling, it's not just sports betting. It's not just gambling in itself being there that's plainly the problem. The youth of today are trapped in a mindset that's being referred to as financial nihilism. This is when you look at an economic system and go, something is wrong. This is all rigged. There's no point in planning. There's no point in saving money. The game is fixed, and the only way to get ahead is to take the biggest risks imaginable and hope you get lucky. This isn't an irrational mindset for young people. This is a response to the reality we were handed. The world my generation was promised would be here for us was robbed away by corporate bankers, financiers, and the richest elites in the world. And the young people don't know what to do about it. 51% of Gen Z says the cost of living is the main thing stopping them from succeeding. 53% feel like they don't earn enough for the life they want. 48% of Gen Z and 46% of millennials say they feel financially insecure, and that's way up from the 30% the year before. Housing prices are 7.5 times median income now. For boomers, it was 4.5. For early millennials, it was 5.5. Only 32% of 27-year-olds own homes today. It used to be closer to 40%. Millennials held 5% of US household wealth at age 25. Gen X had 8%, boomers had 20%, 55% of Gen Z can't cover 3 months of expenses if something goes wrong. Gen Z debt went up 27% last year. Millennials went up 20%. Both are outpacing wages and inflation. So what happens when you can't afford a house? When you can't build wealth the normal way, the way you were promised? You went to school, you got a job, and yet it's not enough. It's never enough, and it's never going to be enough. What are you supposed to do when the world you were promised doesn't exist? Gambling starts to look rational. It's not. Statistically, it's terrible. But emotionally, psychologically, if the only way forward is a moonshot, lots of people seem to be taking the moonshots. 24% of Gen Z say they view gambling as an investment. This is financial nihilism, and it didn't happen by accident. These people were trained from childhood to see randomized outcomes as normal. Loot boxes taught them that spending money for a chance at something was entertainment, and now they're applying that logic to their whole financial lives. They grew up having to pull levers in video games. Now they're pulling it in real life. So who's responsible for this? Well, let's name some names and systems here. Number 1, corporate executives. Bobby Kotick knew. They all knew. The emails prove discussion. Corporate executives discuss how to manipulate and control you from behind the scenes. There are 3 million documents in that recent Jeffy E. dump. You can't look at the evidence and not realize corporate executives are corrupt and they know exactly what they're doing. Number 2, game designers and psychologists. Someone had to build these systems. Someone who studied behavioral psychology. Someone who understood how slot machines work and how to trigger dopamine responses in developing brains. This wasn't accidental. The people who designed all of this knew exactly what they were doing, and they were under orders. Number 3, regulators. Where are the regulators? Where are the world governments? Why hasn't anybody stopped any of this? Oh, they didn't stop it because it's worth billions of dollars. United States gaming tax revenue hit $16.44 billion through November 2025. That's up almost 9% from the year prior. Sports betting alone generated $3.2 billion in state taxes. Globally, we're looking at a $50 to $60 billion annual gambling tax revenue. Macau pulls in $11.7 billion. The UK gets about $4.5 billion. Brazil just started regulating, and they're already nearly $2 billion. So think about this. If you're a government and you're collecting billions of dollars from gambling, and that money is funding your schools and your roadways, and no, let's be serious here. It's going to rampant government corruption. These billions of dollars go towards more corrupt spending. What's your incentive to regulate the pipeline that creates the gamblers? Oh, there isn't one, because you need the gamblers. They need the addicts to keep funding their avarice for power. Number 4, parents. Here's another thing people aren't going to be happy with me saying. Millions of parents failed their kids here. They did. You let your kids play this crap. Monitor your kids, parents. What are they playing? Who are they talking to? If your kid is going to cry his face off because you said he can't have more V-Bucks, maybe that's okay. He'll get over it. In fact, as an adult, he might learn to appreciate the lesson you were imparting on him. You don't need to keep up with the Joneses all the time. All right, sometimes financial health requires you not giving a flying f*** what the Joneses think. We find ourselves on the other side of all of this. The companies failed you. The people doing the busy work failed you. The government and the politicians continue to fail you, as if that's a surprise. And the parents failed because they were too busy watching Breaking Bad and the nightly news to give a crap about what their kids were doing. The gambling epidemic isn't a bug, it's a feature. Corporations profit from addiction. Governments profit from taxation. And the only people who lose are the addicts themselves, who were trained to become addicts before they hit puberty. So what do you do? What can any of us do? Number 1, close your wallet. Stop funding the machine. Stop playing the games that have these predatory mechanics. Sometimes it feels harmless, like, I know it's just cosmetics, or, well, it's just one loot box every now and then, but every transaction reinforces and emboldens these billion-dollar companies to keep it going. Every purchase funds the next system, the next trap, the next attempt to hook someone else's kids. Number 2, talk to the kids in your life. If you have children, nieces, nephews, whatever it may be, they are being targeted right now, not hypothetically, right now. Have the conversation. Explain what loot boxes actually are. Explain why the random rewards feel so good. Give them the tools to recognize when they're being manipulated. You would be surprised how important that might be later on in their lives. Number 3, support regulation. Contact your representatives. Support bills that treat loot boxes as gambling. Support age restriction on randomized purchase mechanics. Make this a political issue. Because right now, the only people lobbying are the corporations making billions. And yeah, look, if I go missing after posting this video and saying to make these recommendations, for full transparency, it wasn't my own doing. Number 4, recognize the trap. If you're a millennial or Gen Z watching this and you find yourself gambling or sports betting, whatever it is, understand that this pull you feel, it was engineered. You were trained to feel this way. Gambling is a net negative. Recognizing that it is a trap is the first step in getting out. And if you need help, please seek help. Get whatever help you need. Number 5, create something. I say this in nearly every video because I believe it. The answer to a broken system isn't just to opt out, it's to build something better. The next generation of game developers can choose to not use predatory monetization. The next generation of creators can make things that empower people instead of exploiting them. But that requires people to step up. That requires you, right? And maybe it's not you directly to create something that changes the world, but you know people who are trying. You know people who are giving it their best every single day. You know people who are making things and actually trying. Even an encouraging word could be the difference between that person going the distance or not. You don't comprehend the net positive you can bring to the world just by having a minutia of effort. If these evil sons of bitches can talk about controlling us and grooming us in the dark behind closed doors, and that has some kind of butterfly effect into the financial hellscape we currently exist in, then I challenge you to imagine instead how much good can be accomplished if we tried our best in the daylight. Until next time, create, innovate, inspire others to do so as well, and for the love of God, cancel Disney Plus.